The November air, thin and sharp as fractured glass, carried the scent of wood smoke and damp earth through the small town of Harmony Creek. Elias Thorne, his back a little more stooped each year, his hands gnarled like ancient tree roots, stood near the modest war memorial in the town square. A faded olive-drab cap, bearing an almost invisible insignia from a war half a century gone, rested on his white hair. It was Veterans Day, a day that for Elias was less about parades and more about a quiet, persistent hum of memory, a resonance of voices and faces long since past. He watched a young mother, her face etched with a familiar exasperation, wrestling a squirming toddler into a stroller while simultaneously trying to prevent a paper bag of pastries from tumbling to the cobblestones. One of the sugary buns, dusted with cinnamon, escaped its confines and rolled precariously close to a muddy puddle. Before the mother could even sigh, Elias had moved with a surprising quickness for his 82 years. He stooped, his old knees protesting with a dull ache, and retrieved the pastry. With a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his pale blue eyes, he handed it back. "There you go, ma'am. Wouldn't want this little soldier to miss out." The mother, flustered, offered a rushed, "Oh, thank you so much," before hurrying on, her child's fretful cries already fading. Elias didn't expect more. He never did. Kindness for him was like breathing, an unconscious act necessary for his own quiet existence. He adjusted his cap, the worn fabric a familiar comfort, and turned his attention back to the small gathering of townsfolk, the mayor's somewhat predictable speech drifting on the breeze. He wasn't one for speeches, but he came every year. It felt like a duty, a silent roll call for those who couldn't answer. His thoughts drifted, as they often did, to his Sarah, her hands always smelling of flower and lavender, gone these 10 years. And before her, to the biting cold of Korean winters, the smell of antiseptic and fear, the faces of young men, boys, really, their eyes wide with a terror he had tried so desperately to soothe, to mend. He had been a medic, his purpose clear amidst the chaos, to staunch the bleeding, to ease the pain, to offer a moment of humanity in the heart of inhumanity. He rarely spoke of it. The memories were his own, heavy and sacred. As the small ceremony concluded and people began to disperse, a cluster of teenagers, loud with the unthinking confidence of youth, swaggered past. One of them, a boy with slicked back hair and a smirk, noticed Elias's cap. "Hey, look at Grandpa," he jeered, his voice carrying easily in the thinning crowd. "Still fighting the war, huh? Did you win, old man?" His companions snickered. Another chimed in. "Veterans Day. More like Ancient History Day." Elias felt a familiar, cold pang in his chest. It wasn't anger, not anymore. It was a weary ache, the sting of being unseen, or worse, seen only as a relic, a caricature. He met the boy's gaze for a fleeting second, his own eyes holding no malice, only a profound, quiet sorrow. He said nothing, simply lowered his head slightly, and began the slow walk towards his small cottage at the edge of town, the laughter of the youths echoing behind him like the distant, hollow crack of spent cartridges. He had learned long ago that some wounds were not of the flesh, and some battles were fought in the unwavering stillness of one's own heart. Unseen by Elias, but not by all, the exchange had been witnessed. Captain Eva Rostova, an active-duty Army intelligence officer visiting her parents in Harmony Creek, stood a little way off, her uniform impeccable, her posture radiating a controlled fury. She had seen the casual cruelty, the dismissive laughter, and the old soldier's quiet retreat. It struck a nerve deep within her, a place reserved for the honor of her profession and the respect she held for those who had paved the way. Her grandfather, a man much like Elias, had told her stories, not of glory, but of duty and sacrifice, stories that shaped her. Eva watched Elias walk away, his silhouette frail against the gray sky. She felt an immediate, pressing need to right this small, ugly wrong. She approached Martha Abernathy, the town's unofficial historian and postmistress, who was tidying up the leftover programs. "Martha," Eva began, her voice low but firm. "That older gentleman who just left, the one in the olive cap. Who is he?" Martha peered over her spectacles. "Oh, that's Elias Thorne, sweet man, lives out by Miller's Stream, keeps to himself mostly, since his Sarah passed. He was a medic, you know. Korea, I believe." "Elias Thorne," Eva repeated, committing the name to memory. "Thank you." That evening, back at her parents' home, Eva Rostova sat at her laptop. She didn't have much to go on, just a name, a town, and a faded memory of an insignia. But she had resources, networks, built over years of service. She began to type, sending out a carefully worded inquiry into a secure veterans online forum, one known for its deep roots and fiercely protective community. She described the encounter, omitting the rawest details of the mockery but conveying the disrespect shown to an elderly veteran. Seeking to identify Elias Thorne, Army medic, likely Korean War era, from Harmony Creek, deserves to know he is remembered and respected by his brothers and sisters in arms. The digital ether hummed. Within hours, the ripples began to spread. The name Elias Thorne resonated in forgotten corners of the country. An old sergeant major in Arizona, his fingers stiff with arthritis, typed slowly, "Thorne? Doc Thorne? Saved my leg outside Chippyongni. Never thought I'd walk again." A retired colonel in Florida, reading the post, felt a jolt. Elias Thorne. Yes. He carried Lieutenant Miller. No relation, Eva, though the coincidence is striking. 2 miles under mortar fire. Miller didn't make it, but Thorne never left him. Stayed with him till the end, reciting the 23rd Psalm. I was there. I saw it. More stories trickled in, then flooded. Tales of quiet courage, of unwavering compassion. Elias Thorne, the man who hummed hymns while suturing wounds by flickering lantern light. Elias Thorne, who shared his meager rations with terrified replacements. Elias Thorne, who held the hands of the dying and promised to remember their names. He had sought no medals, received few official commendations beyond the expected. His reward, it seemed, had been the quiet knowledge of lives touched, of suffering eased. The posts painted a portrait of a man who embodied the highest ideals of service, a man whose gentle demeanor concealed a core of unyielding steel and boundless empathy. Eva read them, tears stinging her eyes. This was the legacy being mocked on a street corner by ignorant children. This was the quiet dignity that deserved not scorn, but the deepest reverence. The online community was stirring, a sense of collective purpose forming. It wasn't just about Elias anymore. It was about all the Eliases, the quiet heroes forgotten by a world quick to move on. A plan began to coalesce, simple in its intent, audacious in its potential scope. It started with a few messages between Eva and some of the veterans who had shared their stories. "We should do something," one message read. "He needs to know." Eva contacted the commander of the nearest army base, Fort Devon, a man she knew respected tradition and valued the lineage of service. She explained the situation, forwarded the testimonials. The commander, a gruff but fair man, listened intently. He couldn't officially sanction a mass movement, but he could ensure that any service members who felt compelled to travel to Harmony Creek on their own time would have his tacit understanding. Word spread through unit channels, through VFW posts and American Legion halls. A pilgrimage of sorts was beginning. Elias Thorne awoke 2 days later to the familiar chirping of sparrows outside his window. He followed his morning routine: coffee, a piece of toast, a slow walk through his small, meticulously tended garden where the last of the autumn roses clung stubbornly to life. He was pruning a dead branch when he heard it, a low, distant rumble like faraway thunder, but more sustained, more rhythmic. He straightened, his old joints creaking, and looked towards the road that led into Harmony Creek. The rumbling grew louder. Then he saw them. First, a single line of motorcycles, their riders clad in leather vests adorned with patches, POW, MIA flags, unit insignias, American Eagles. They moved with a disciplined slowness, their engines a respectful thrum rather than a roar. Behind them, cars and trucks, dozens of them, then scores, then hundreds, filling the narrow country road, winding back as far as he could see. They parked along the verges, on the sparse grass, their occupants emerging not with haste, but with a quiet solemnity. Men and women, young, old, and in between. Some wore crisp uniforms, Army green, Air Force blue, Marine dress blues, Navy whites. Others wore civilian clothes, but many bore the subtle markers of their service: a veteran's cap, a unit pin on a lapel, the squared set of their shoulders, the directness of their gaze. They fanned out, forming a loose, respectful perimeter around his small property, their numbers swelling until it seemed the entire valley was filled with them. Elias stood, pruning shears dangling from his hand, utterly bewildered. He recognized a few faces from town, but the vast majority were strangers. Captain Eva Rostova stepped forward from the silent assembly, her uniform immaculate. She walked towards him, her boots making soft sounds on the damp grass. She stopped a few feet away and executed a flawless, sharp salute. "Mr. Elias Thorne," her voice was clear, carrying in the sudden, profound stillness. "We've come to honor you." Elias blinked, his mind struggling to comprehend. "Honor me? For what?" His voice was a hoarse whisper. "For your service, sir," Eva said, her eyes unwavering. "For your courage, for your compassion. For men like Lieutenant Miller and Sergeant Major Davies, and countless others whose names we may not know, but whose lives you touched." And then it began. As if on an unspoken signal, from the edge of his garden to the far horizon, hands rose. Hundreds of them. 1,000, perhaps more. Salutes snapped into place, held with a rigid, heartfelt precision. There were no speeches, no declarations, just the profound, silent eloquence of that collective gesture. The air thrummed with unspoken respect, a vast, powerful current of gratitude washing over him. Elias looked out at the sea of faces, young soldiers barely out of their teens, their expressions earnest and awed, grizzled veterans, their eyes holding the weight of shared experience, some glistening with unshed tears, men and women of every branch, every rank, united in this singular, unexpected tribute. The mockery of a few days prior, the casual cruelty of those teenagers, seemed to shrink, to vanish, consumed by this overwhelming tide of recognition. He felt a hand on his arm. It was Martha Abernathy, her eyes shining. "They know, Elias," she said softly. "They remember." One by one, individuals stepped forward. A young Marine, his dress blues immaculate, presented Elias with a challenge coin, pressing it firmly into his palm. "From the 3rd Battalion, 5 Marines, sir. Thank you for your service." An older Air Force veteran, his voice thick with emotion, simply shook Elias's hand. "You patched me up near Suwon, Doc. Never got to say thank you properly." A woman in Army fatigues, her name tag reading Gonzalez, offered a small folded flag. "My grandfather served with you. He always said you were the best of them." Each word, each gesture, chipped away at the layers of quiet resignation Elias had built around his heart. He wasn't a hero, not in the way of grand pronouncements and shining medals. He had simply done what needed to be done, what his conscience dictated. Yet, here they were, 1,000 souls, standing in his yard, under the gray November sky, telling him it had mattered. The loneliness that had been his quiet companion for so long seemed to recede, replaced by a warmth that spread through his weary limbs like a forgotten sunrise. He couldn't speak. He could only nod, his eyes, those pale blue windows to a long and storied life, filling with tears he didn't try to hide. He raised a trembling hand, not in a salute. He was a civilian now, long removed from that world, but in a gesture of acknowledgement, of profound, humble gratitude. The gathering lasted for perhaps an hour. There was no fanfare, no media, just a quiet, powerful communion. As respectfully as they had arrived, they began to depart. Engines rumbled to life, a low chorus of farewell. Eva Rostova was one of the last to leave. She approached him again. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice softer now, "the world can be forgetful, but some things, some people, are never truly forgotten by those who understand." Elias finally found his voice, still raspy. I don't know what to say." "Thank you, Captain." "No, sir," she replied, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "Thank you." She saluted once more, then turned and walked towards her car. As the last vehicle disappeared over the rise, a profound silence settled over Harmony Creek, deeper and more resonant than before. Elias stood for a long time in the fading light, the cool air on his face, the challenge coin heavy and solid in his palm. The weight of it was grounding, a tangible link to a past he had carried alone, now shared, now honored. Later, as twilight bled into the fields, he walked back to his garden. The roses, battered by the season, still held their color. He noticed a young sapling he had planted in the spring, a fragile thing he worried might not survive the coming winter. He knelt, his old knees protesting less now, and gently firmed the soil around its base, clearing away a few fallen leaves. He thought of the faces, the salutes, the quiet respect. He thought of Sarah, wishing she could have seen it. The mocking words of the teenagers still echoed faintly, but they were different now, stripped of their power, like distant, harmless fireflies against the brilliance of 1,000 stars. He straightened up, looking out at the vast expanse of the darkening sky, where the first stars were beginning to prick the velvet canvas. A sense of peace, profound and encompassing, settled over him. He was not forgotten. His service, his quiet acts of compassion, had woven threads into a tapestry far larger and more enduring than he had ever imagined. The land around him felt patient, waiting for spring, for renewal. And, in Elias Thorne's heart, something small but strong, like that young sapling, felt ready to grow again, reaching for the light. He was an old soldier, yes, but today he had been reminded that even the oldest trees cast long, significant shadows, offering shelter and solace to those who came after.